Thanks so much for joining us today. God wants to do so much for you and through you, and we'd love to hear about it. Take a moment to send your story to stories@parkerhill.org. And if you'd like to partner with us financially, you can do that by going to parkerhill.org/give and choose the giving option that works best for you. Well, thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoy today's message.
Mark's the middle child of 5, so he was kind of the youngest for a while, and then he got sandwiched in there with Joseph and Jill.
I grew up in a Christ-like home and had believers as parents. Went to church, went to youth group, but when we left there, I kind of left it there. Just hanging out with the wrong group of kids. The influences weren't good. It didn't take me long to get into trouble. As most households are, there were definitely rules that had to be followed, or else there was consequences. Didn't want to follow them. Wanted to just do what I wanted to do.
The screwdriver.
Screwdriver.
You got suspended.
Oh, that was a slingshot. The screwdriver.
You and I are kind of wired the same.
Yeah.
So I remember having conversations with you when I said, look, I've already been down this road. I can tell you what exits not to get off on.
I took them. I didn't want to hear it. If you're going to tell me the fire's hot, I'm going to stick my hand in there and make sure it's hot.
How hot is hot?
Yeah. Lived in the house until I was 18. Went to college for 2 years at Worthington Scranton. Played basketball, played baseball, had a great time, got exposed to more things in the world, like drinking and partying. I knew after 2 years I could transfer to University Park down in main campus. Just went wild. It took me 3 weeks to get into some major trouble with the law. My brother had some contacts in State College, so he kind of tried to get me plugged into the church. I did that. Still wasn't having it. Went to church, left it at church, still went into my own ways. My last semester before I dropped out, I think I got a .75 GPA, and that was kind of a wake-up call. And I remember my dad saying, just, what are you doing?
It's painful. It's painful to have to watch somebody disregard what you consider is good advice and yet still love them.
Yeah, what a powerful story I think we can all relate to. I really appreciate Ken and Mark being willing to share some of their journey with us, and we'll come back to that story in a little bit, but I have to ask you, have you ever been in a circumstance like that? Have you ever watched somebody you love run headlong into heartache? Have you ever observed some activity in someone's life, a friend or a family member, and you said, that's not gonna go anywhere good, that's not gonna turn out well? Have you ever watched somebody and then you stepped in, you tried to warn somebody and they didn't respond very well? And maybe you're not the watcher, maybe you're the one who's headed down the wrong path. Has it been you that's gotten the advice and pushed it away and gone your own way? Well, hi, my name is Dan. I'm one of the pastors here at Parker Hill, and this is the second part in our series, Someday. And we're starting off this year with this series to help us head to that someday that God has for us, to make the most of 2018. And here's what I'm hoping to accomplish today. I'm just going to tell it to you right up front. I want everyone here to answer one question and to take one action. My hope is to help you answer one question and to take one action. And the question is simply this: does the path you're on lead to the place you want to go? Does the path you're on lead to the place that you want to go? That's the question. Do your actions align with your stated ambitions? We've called this series Someday because we all have a someday that we'd like to achieve. Our someday is our preferred future. And so if we are here, our someday is there. If we are here today, our someday is out there, and our hope is to get there, achieve that. And maybe your someday is something like, I want to lose weight, or I want to fall in love, or I want to make more money, or I want to stop a bad habit, or I want to make my marriage or relationships stronger. And this middle part you see here, this is the maze of pathways that we could take on our way from here to there. But the reality is that not every path that you could take in that maze will lead where you want to go. And so does the path you're on lead to the place that you want to go? And here's the reason why this is so important. And this is common sense, but it's not common practice. In fact, this brilliant insight, which I'm about to share with you, is all over the Bible. You can find it on most pages of the Bible because it just makes sense, but we don't do it. It's common sense, but it's not common practice. This is not just a Bible thing, though. It's a life thing. It's a thing. It's just true. It's just wisdom. This is the way that life works. And here's the insight. The direction you walk determines where you end up. The direction you walk determines where you end up. So let's unpack that a little bit. There's direction. Your life is headed in a certain direction. Your decisions or non-decisions are adding up to a someday. And like we said last week, your someday grows from what you plant today. And then there's walk. That's the progress that you're making steadily towards that end. You can do it intentionally or unintentionally, but you're moving. You are walking in a direction. And determines. Determines is this word that says it's gonna happen because you can't cheat the system. Your life will go in a certain direction, and it will go in the direction that your steps are taking you. You can't say, I'm headed to Canada, and then go south. Unless you change direction, you will not end up where you hoped to go. And that's why it says end up, because you get there someday. It's not tomorrow. It builds up over time, but eventually what you reap, you will sow. And so the direction you walk determines where you end up. So what direction are you walking? Are you making progress towards where you hope to go? Are you headed from here to the there you want to see someday? And don't kid yourself, all right? This principle it's not the direction you dream determines where you end up. I mean, we all have dreams. Dreams are good things. They're not bad. And you might have dreams that inspire you, but it doesn't whisk you away from here to there. The dream cannot carry you. Walking does that. There's no shortcut. There's no magic carpet that you can ride on. Dreams don't do it, but walking does. The principle is not that the decision you talk about determines where you end up. I mean, how much have you talked about losing weight, or writing a book, or starting a blog, or creating a side hustle, or moving to a warmer climate? I mean, wow, we just talk and talk and talk. We talk a lot. But without walking, it's just talking. Talk can't transport you from here to there, but walking can. It's not the direction that you feel determines where you end up. And we can feel a lot of good things. Anger over injustice, compassion for the downtrodden, excitement over an upcoming event, or conviction even over our own brokenness. But our feelings, as good as they might be, cannot fly us from here to there. But walking can get you from here to there. All of these things are not bad in and of themselves. In fact, they can inspire you to get out and start walking, but none of them can take the place of walking in your life. I'll tell you what, I know this from personal experience. I've done this so many times in my life. I've fallen for these substitutes. I've dreamed some pretty audacious dreams, and I've even prayed about them. And then I haven't done much else. I've talked about how to make the world a better place and the difference that we can make in it, but sometimes I just move on like nothing ever happened. I haven't changed anything. I've shed tears over the wrongs and the hurts that I see in this world, and then I've gone right on with my life. None of that's bad, but it definitely does not replace movement, walking, progress. And when I get to the end of this year, and when I get to the end of this decade, and frankly, when I get to the end of my life, I guess I want to be a better man. I want to be a better Jesus follower. I want to be a better husband and a better father. I want to be a better pastor. And that does not happen through dreams and talk. It happens through walking. And I'm guessing I'm not the only one that feels this way about this year. I'm guessing there's other people here in the room right now who want to make progress, who want to see change, that want to go from here to there. And I'm probably not the only one who's substituted dreaming and talking and feeling for actually doing something. We all want to see the someday that God has for us. But that change won't happen. We won't get from here to there unless we find the right path. Because the direction, the path you're on, the direction you walk determines where you end up. And so I'll ask you again, this is a question we all got to answer together. Does the path you're on lead to the place you want to go? We need some insight into this, don't we? To know what path we're on ourselves. And that's why I'm so glad that in the Old Testament, a dad sat down with his son and had a conversation about our paths in life. And he did it by telling a story that's going to be pretty interesting for us to dive in together. And so the part of the Bible that we're going to be in together today is in Proverbs 7, verses 6 through 27. And while you get there in your Bible or Bible app, let me fill you in on the Proverbs. See, the part of the Bible that we call Proverbs is actually a collection of wise sayings, like fortune cookies, but you can really trust them. And they come in all sorts of short, pithy sayings. Sometimes they're a helpful insight, like Proverbs 4:23, which says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Or maybe it's a warning, like Proverbs 16:18, which says, pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Or like Han Solo said to Luke Skywalker, great shot, kid, now don't get cocky. Or maybe it's just common sense things, like Proverbs 27:2, where it says, let someone else praise you, and not your own mouth, an outsider, and not your own lips. See, the Proverbs are full of incredible practical wisdom and insight. And there are 31 chapters in Proverbs, and that's why people take the book of Proverbs if they want to dive into the Bible, and they'll read just one chapter a day for a month so that they can grow wiser. But you need to understand that every proverb is not a promise. It's sage advice. The Proverbs are full of profound insights, but they're not absolute promises. It's the kind of advice that if you follow it, will typically get good results. It's called wisdom. Now, most of the chapters in Proverbs are made up of these collections of all these short sayings, but there's some parts of the book that are these longer discourses between a father and a son, giving advice on how to win at life. And so that's what we're going to look at in chapter 7 together. And from this story, we're going to learn the three questions that reveal the true direction our lives are taking. And from this story, we're going to see what path we are on. But I got to warn you, this story that we're about to dive into is a little bit risque. This story that we're about to dive into is kind of like watching an accident happen. It's horrific. It goes in slow motion. You just wish you could stop it, but you can't. So that's what you're strapping in for. So get ready. Let's dive in, starting in verse 6. It says this, at the window of my house, this is the father talking, I looked down through the lattice. And so he sets the scene for us. And this is very, very important for you to get everything else that comes next. The father is saying, I'm up on a second or third story or higher. And I'm in a position where I'm up high and I can see down through the window down to the street. And the reason he starts the story this way is so that we would understand his perspective. Keyword, perspective. And so he is looking out down at the street, and he says this because it's both physically true, but it's also symbolically true. Physically, he can see down into the street and he can see where it goes. But symbolically, he is an older man who has some life experience. And he can look down into the pathways of life, and he can see a little bit further than the younger people can. And so he can see the whole path from up there. That's the point. And so he's going to share some insights about from his perspective to his son. Verse 7. He says, I saw among the simple, I noticed among the young men, a youth who had no sense. All right, I mean, did he just rag on that guy? I mean, did he just look down at the street and call that guy out? I don't know, he calls him simple. He lacks sense. I mean, is he knocking this kid's IQ? No, that's not what he's doing. In fact, there's 5 words used in the Proverbs to describe foolishness. And what's used here is the word pethy. And it means wide open or easily fooled. This is not an insult. In fact, this is just an observation. He's saying that this young man is like every young person, that we all start out wide open, gullible, naive. Simple means to be easily influenced, not discerning, lacking common sense. So not only do we start off life lacking discernment, but you have to be honest, even as you grow older, there's areas in your life where you're a little bit more gullible. You fall for some things. And that's what it means to be simple, naive, wide open to influence. And so here's where we find the first way that we can identify the path that you're on. It's by asking this question: where do I go? So where do you go? Where do you go? You know what path you're on by where you go. Notice what he says next in verse 8. It says, he was going down the street near her corner. What's that about? Walking along in the direction of her house. I mean, that sounds suspicious, doesn't it? I mean, whoever this woman is, she certainly has a reputation. And it sounds like the kind of place everyone knows about except, well, the naive. And from our perspective, we can see where this is headed, but the naive man down on the path, he cannot. So the first thing that we learn is the direction. He's headed toward her house. And then it says in verse 9, at twilight, as the day was fading, and as the dark of night set in. And so it doesn't just tell us the direction, but it tells us the time of day. And so you only need to know those two things to start to get like an ominous feeling, all right? It's getting dark, and he's headed towards her house. It all seems so obvious to us. And the Father tells the story this way on purpose so that we would look at the situation and go, well, wait a second. I mean, I can see where this stuff is leading. I can read the clues. It's not that confusing. I know the pattern. I know the path this kid's steps are taking him towards. I know what's going on here. And he sets up the story this way so that we would ask ourselves, where am I headed? Where do I go? Physically, where do you go? I mean, what establishments do you frequent? What do you do on a business trip that you wouldn't do back home? Where do you go with your group of buddies? Are you going back to shopping again? Do you go into locked liquor cabinets? Where do you go? Do you go to church? Do you go to a community group? Do you go to a rescue mission? Do you go to donate your time? Do you try to help people in the community? Do you volunteer to coach? Where do you go? Where do you go mentally? Where do your eyes go? What do you daydream about? What scenarios play out in your mind? Or do you remind yourself of truth? Where do you go? Do you think about the reason that you're working so hard and it makes it worth it? Do you set your mind on good things? Where do you go, physically and mentally? See, the first question you have to ask yourself to understand the path that you are on today is, where do I go? But the second part of the path is this: who you listen to. Who you listen to. Look at what happens next in verse 10. It says, then out came a woman to meet him, dressed like a prostitute and with crafty intent. I told you it was a little risque. See, all of the signs should send this guy some major warning signals, all right? She comes out to meet him, all right? That means that this is not some chance encounter. For her, he's a target. And she's dressed to seduce, and so she's like a hunter on the prowl, and she has some crafty intent here. She's about to spring a trap. So everyone in town knows this about her, except this oblivious young man. The next verses tell us more about her reputation. It says, she is unruly and defiant. Her feet never stay at home, now in the street, now in the squares, at every corner she lurks. And to clear up any misunderstanding about this is not saying she has to stay at home and women should stay at home. Just throw that out. That's not what it's saying. Let me help you out here. What he is saying is that she is not satisfied at home with her husband. And so she is restless and going out into the street to try to find some satisfaction through other means. And so she tries to tangle up naive young men in her web. And she's pretty stinking bold about it. Verse 13 says this: she took hold of him and kissed him, and with a brazen face she said, and what she says is really weird, but here's what she says: today I fulfilled my vows, and I have food for my fellowship offering at home. I don't know what that's supposed to. Okay, that doesn't sound very enticing, but you got to understand what's happening in this day. See, the Jews would go to the temple to offer a sacrifice for their sins. And what happened would be there'd be some meat left over, and they'd take that back with them. They were allowed to, and usually they would cook it and have a feast because it would go bad. And so she's saying, hey, I just got out of church. I'm all clean, ready to go again, ready to fill up my sin list. I mean, I'm good. So basically right after church, she says, hey, let's go commit adultery. And so, verse 15 says, so I came out to meet you, and I looked for you and have found you. So beautiful. It reminds me of that time that I cried during The Notebook, No, I didn't, okay? Now, she makes him feel like he's the one. Like, you're the one I've always been searching for. Like, you're the one, you complete me. But we know, from our perspective up with the dad, looking down at the street, seeing all the signs, that's bogus. But this is what we feel when we listen to the voice of temptation. Because it tells us it's going to fulfill our every desire. Finally, you are wanted. Finally, you are desirable. Finally, someone who understands you. Finally, someone who's crazy about you. Finally, someone who can't keep their hands off of you because you're so amazingly attractive. Finally, someone for you. But remember, what someone will do for you, they'll do to you later. And what she's willing to do for him, isn't that impressive then? And so she continues to persuade him, and he continues to listen to her. Verse 16, I have covered my bed with colored linens from Egypt, exotic, interesting. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes and cinnamon. Come, let's drink deeply of love till morning. Let's enjoy ourselves with love. I mean, this is enticing, right? And there it is, the immoral proposition. And to us, it's so obvious what she's doing, but it's just attractive to him. I mean, we could see it coming a mile away, but he's pleasantly surprised. Oh wow, you're the one. We know what's next, but he can't wait to find out what's next. We cringe, he smiles. We look away, he leans in. I mean, why? Why do we have such different reactions to the same scenario? Because we have perspective. We can see what path he's on. We can see where all of this leads. And maybe when faced with the option of totally going headlong across the line he knows he should not go across, he hesitates, maybe. Maybe he did, because she presses and she says more. Next she says this, verse 19. My husband's not at home. He has gone on a long journey. He took his purse filled with money and will not be home till full moon. My husband is gone, and he's going to be gone for a long time, which means no chance that you'll ever get caught. This is a classic lie of every temptation you've ever heard. It's going to be all pleasure and no consequences, I promise. All pleasure, no consequences. No one will know. You don't have to worry about it. Finally, you'll feel what you've always wanted to feel. And nothing bad will ever come of it. He falls for it. Verse 21. With persuasive words, she led him astray. She seduced him with her smooth talk. He listened to her and was led astray by her. So if you want to know what path you're on, you got to ask the question, who am I listening to? So who do you listen to? What voices have the most weight in your life? What voices have your ear? Who do you listen to? Is it your coworkers, or is it Facebook? Is it the news? Is it your favorite radio talk show host? Is it your favorite music on the radio? I mean, students, it might just be your group of friends. And that's not bad, and friends are great. I am who I am today because of the influence of the friends that I had in high school that pushed me closer to Christ instead of pulling me away. Are those the kind of friends you have? Are they helping you grow, or are they taking you off track? See, the voice you listen to most has the most influence in your life. It's true what they say. Show me your friends, and I will show you your future. Proverbs 13:20 put it this way: walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. So look at your friends. Who are you listening to? So you know a path you're on by where you go and who you listen to. And thirdly and lastly, what you do. Verse 22 says this: all at once he followed her like an ox going to the slaughter. This gets a little graphic. If you need to look away or plug your ears, that's okay for a second. Like a deer stepping into a noose till an arrow pierces his liver. Like a bird darting into a snare, little knowing that it will cost him his life. It's graphic. It's vivid. It's to make you imagine a scene of trapped, dead, of being stuck and being slaughtered. It's supposed to shock us. It's supposed to wake us up. And how in the world could this young man just head out his door one night, walk down a road, end up in bed with this lady, and ruin his life? How does that even happen? Because he stayed on the path he was on. And so, the moral of the story comes next, verse 24. He says, now then, my sons, listen to me. Pay attention to what I say. Do not let your heart turn to her ways or stray into her paths. Many are the victims that she has brought down. Her slain are a mighty throng. Her house is a highway to the grave, leading down to the chambers of death. He says, son, listen to me. Please listen to me. Don't miss this. There are certain paths that lead to certain outcomes, certain patterns that if you do not break them or change them will lead you to a certain place, a place you do not want to go. So watch out for the warning signs. Look at your own life. Pay attention to where you are going, to who you are listening to, and to what you do. Don't go down that path. Pull back. Get perspective, because if you don't, you will end up as one more casualty. Wisdom says the direction you walk determines where you end up. Now, I told you that I wanted to help you answer one question and to do one thing. And the question is, does the path you're on lead to the place that you want to go? Because at the beginning of 2018, you're here on this map, and you want to go to there. Someday you want to achieve there. And the question is the path you're on leading to that place? And if you want to know, am I on the right path? Ask the question, where do I go? Who do I listen to? What do I do? And so to help us run this through for our own lives in a very practical way, I want to give a couple examples. And so if your goal from here to there, if here is always thinking about starting a side hustle, and there is actually launching it, if here is, I've always wanted to get into this hobby, or I have a great idea or a great passion, but sometimes for some reason it just doesn't happen, then let's just consider the answers to this question. If you're saying, oh man, I always want to start a side hustle, where do you go? Well, if you're the kind of person that goes to Facebook, physically or mentally, you go to fear, that's a path. That's a pattern. And if maybe you ask the question, who do you listen to? And you think, well, I just hang out with other people that don't really want to do much with their lives either, people without purpose. I'm not ragging on them, okay? But that's who you're listening to. And then you say, well, what do you do? What do you do? Well, I watch Netflix like everyone else on the planet, all right? And so that's the path. That's the pattern. And as you sit out there with your perspective and you look at that pattern, you have to say, I know where that leads. And it's not to a side hustle. It's not to a productive business, blog, book, whatever. And so you say, okay, well, here's another path. Where do you go? You've always wanted to do this? Well, I just started Googling some tutorial websites, right? I wanted to click on Facebook, but I didn't, so then I'm on the tutorial and I just watch it, right? I start to learn how this thing really works and how to pull this off. And you say, well, who are you listening to? Well, I start to follow experts in the field on Twitter and on Facebook, and I get their emails in my inbox, and then I pay a few bucks to get one of their video series so that I can figure out how they really did this thing. And then you do a test run. Like, what do you do? Well, I actually try it, okay? I don't just learn about it, I actually try it. You know where that leads? Somewhere. I mean, you have to keep repeating that cycle, right, to see if this side hustle will take off, but you know where that path leads. Or say you're looking at your life and you say, well, man, I'd really like to have a strong marriage one day. Let's look at the chart. That's the question, what path am I on? Well, where do you go? Well, when the kids are in bed, I go into my own world. They have their tablet, I have my laptop, we sit and we do our own things. Where do you go mentally? Well, I go into dissatisfaction, all the things wrong with our relationship and what I don't like about them and what they do. Well, who are you listening to? Well, I have a group of friends at work and they listen really well to me. And they tell me that I'm always right. Complainers, right? We all hate the world and nothing's going right. Okay, what do? Well, I'm a fault finder. I just keep a catalog of all the things wrong that he does, that she does, right? And you look at that path and you would say, I know where that leads. Does it lead to a strong marriage? No. You can tell what path you're on by the answers to these questions. And so if you were to instead go on dates and focus on what's good, if you were to go to some marriage experts and say, tell me some things to try to help strengthen this marriage, and then you were to be a good finder, right? You looked at the relationship and said, this is what I love, and let's try some of those things together. You know where that path will lead? To a stronger marriage. Wisdom says that the direction you walk determines where you end up. The path you're on really matters. And as obvious as this principle might be to you right now, you have to admit that we kind of miss it sometimes. And to share why we miss it, I want you to help me solve some puzzles. These are the kind of puzzles that I'm going to give you a sequence, and then you're going to tell me what's next. You're going to finish the pattern for me, all right? So here's puzzle number 1. These are some shapes. And so if you were to look at this, you'd square, circle, circle, square, circle, circle. So don't shout it out. I don't want you to give it away. On the count of 3, you're going to shout out which one you think it is, A, B, C, or D. 1, 2, 3. A, that's right. The answer is A. You guys are brilliant at figuring out these patterns. All right, let's do another one. Here's the alphabet. Here's the numbers. 5, 10, 15, 20, 20. I'm not going to give it away now, okay? A, B, C, or D. Shout it out. Go. B. That's right. The answer is B. Brilliant. I knew I was in the room of geniuses. Okay, very good. How about this one? Finish the pattern. A, B, C, E, F, G. Think about it. A, B, C, or D. Ready, go. The answer is C. We dropped every 4th letter on that one. Just seeing if you were paying attention, okay? Now, you're really good at this, okay? You look at this pattern, and you see where it leads, and you can guess what comes next. You got great perspective, great insight. You guys are amazing, right? Now, let's go back to that first puzzle again. And I want you to just imagine for a minute that we could somehow zoom in on this picture, and we could just kind of get in real